What makes a detective great? Their deductive reasoning, their ability to access any place or person, their overall intelligence? Or is it their ability to turn on detective mode at any time? Detective Chimp has to be hands down one of the most powerful detectives around. What makes him so great? Probably his intellect. Detective Chimp is Bobo T chimpanzee. And while you might be thinking it's wild that I included a chimpanzee on my list, this isn't just any chimpanzee. Also, this is comics, and for a while there, monkeys and apes sold big time. So primates are a weirdly large part of our comic book history overall, Bobo included. Bobo was given the abilities to understand and communicate with all animals in addition to super genius intelligence and, I believe, eternal youth by the Fountain of Youth. That's right, the Fountain of Youth. So while he doesn't have super strength or the ability to fly around, Detective Chimp is still considered to have superpowers of a kind, and he often uses those powers, his smarts, to solve some of the most challenging detective cases. Oh yeah, and he's even dabbled in the realm of the mystic as well. Next up, it seems like Luke Cage has a thing for amazing lady detectives because he dates Misty, but also later ends up married to Jessica Jones, who has also become known for her sleuthing abilities in the comics. If you don't know Jessica Jones, she initially started out as a superhero going by the name of Jewel. She had the superpower of super strength and she can also fly, but eventually she fell under the influence of Purple Man and was only freed from her brainwashing when she was forced to fight against the Avengers. This experience changed her, and while dealing with her trauma surrounding these events, she decided to help people in a more grounded way as a detective instead of as a super. This next entry from DC never gets enough love in the comics or in videos like this, which is why I'm excited to include him here. Who is Harvey Bullock? He is a good friend of Commissioner Jim Gordon and his former partner, depending on the continuity, but I digress. For many people, Harvey Bullock is a much beloved and underrated character in the Batman universe. Many also consider him to be one of the bravest characters in the Gotham television series as well, at least initially. In that show, he ends up being a straight and narrow cop who, I believe, turns out to be corrupted. But in the comics, he was a cop who wanted to go straight and narrow, but saw the system was broken and ended up acting corrupt, only to team up with Jim Gordon, his partner, later on, to redeem the system. Because he didn't like that it was corrupt, he just didn't know any way to fix it. Gordon came along and they did it together. While Gordon has moved up with the GCPD considerably throughout his career, Bullock is basically a lifetime police detective and acts as a foil for Gordon's confidence in Batman, often playing the skeptic about whether or not Batman can truly help the city. While DC seemingly has monopoly on most of the smartest and greatest detective comics, being themselves a comic publisher who's of course named after their flagship series, Detective Comics, DC, Marvel definitely has some characters who have become iconic for their investigative abilities. One of those amazing detectives is, of course, Misty Knight. Man, people often know Misty Knight as one half of the Daughters of the Dragon team, known for her master martial arts skills. And while, yes, this is also true, she started out working as a police officer and later in her life would also go independent, working as a private investigator. I would say one of Misty's greatest strengths as a detective is all of her connections. She knows a lot of people, both in terms of law enforcement and in the vigilante world. So when it comes to doing some digging or getting a powerful ally, she has a ton of resources at her fingertips. I mean, she even has X-Men connections thanks to her being Jean Grey's roommate at one point, so she just knows everyone. As with many of the greatest detectives in DC Comics, this next hero to be included on our list has been compared to Batman in the past, in terms of his own level of deductive reasoning. We're talking here about Elongated Man. Elongated Man is Ralph Dibny, and his wife Sue also often worked alongside him to solve mysteries the world over. Even when they both died, this didn't even stop them, with Ralph becoming a ghost detective alongside his wife. Short-lived period, but something I would have loved to see like a whole series of. Just them solving mysteries, solving cases as ghost detectives together. So cute. One of the greatest detectives in a potential future is Green Lantern Joe Moline. Sojourner also happens to be my favorite Green Lantern thanks to the series Far Sector, and anytime I have an opportunity, of course, to include her on a list, you know I'm gonna do it because that's how much I love her. Hence this entry. But she's here, of course, for a reason, like I said. During the now Elseworld, but at one point potential future of Future State, it was stated that Green Lantern Moline had actually become known not simply as the greatest detective in one city, or even the world, or even like her own sector of the galaxy, but instead the greatest detective in the universe. This is a pretty big claim, and while Jo hasn't achieved this status just yet, I feel she has proven through her early adventures in Far Sector that she has great potential. She was thrown into basically an interstellar civil war where deep-seated secrets had to be uncovered for her to address civil unrest between two different alien species who were like cohabitating on the planet, and ended up finding a way to solve the case, save the day, and in the end prevent the planet from breaking out into a full-on war. They initially started to fight, but Jo was actually shortly after able to put a stop to this, all thanks to basically her detective skills really. Well, of course that and her power ring. From space back to Earth, Renee Montoya is one of the best, though likely not the best detective in Gotham City. She's one of the few people in comics who was able to deduce the true identity of Batman. She's not just great at investigating, but she also is good at escaping and fighting, which also helps her to solve her cases, allowing her to get out of situations she may have gotten into through her investigating. She's also risen in the ranks, both within the Gotham City Police Department and as a vigilante, moving up to detective of major crimes in the New Earth continuity, and in the Prime Earth continuity, she also ended up accepting a promotion to commissioner in Gotham from Mayor Nakano, replacing the man who once trained her, Harvey Bullock. Now, when it comes to those who are good at solving mysteries, sometimes you have to turn to a mysterious figure for that. A figure who sometimes you need mystery to solve a mystery, you know what I mean? Which is where the question comes in. Who is he? That was initially a big part of his mystery as a character, and in the modern day, still is. However, the most well-known version of this character is probably Vic Sage. If you thought Renee Montoya was a great detective, this is actually the person who also helped to train her. Renee worked with the question for a while before eventually taking up the mantle herself in Sage's place. While Renee worked as a detective for the GCPD as a civilian, Sage in his civilian life was a journalist, which lends well also to his skill set. He is said to be the second greatest detective in the world, but for me, I would say it's a tie between him and Detective Chimp. Speaking of world's greatest detectives, well, Multiple Man himself is known for his detective skills as well, somewhat. There was actually a version of him that was supposedly the world's greatest detective over at Marvel Comics. Well, not actually Jamie, this dupe was a version of him, a duplicate as per his mutant powers. That is what Jamie Madrix's mutant powers are. He can create duplicates of himself, and when reabsorbed, he gets to take in their knowledge and their skills. This means that Jamie is probably one of the smartest and most capable people in the entire world in Marvel Comics, thanks to all the duplicates he's created and all the lives that they have lived, and then he's absorbed those, so he has all that knowledge within him and all those skills. This particular dupe, the one who was supposedly the world's greatest detective, basically decided to not absorb back into Jamie and chose instead to sacrifice his life rather than to pass on all his knowledge and all the secrets he'd acquired to the original. This was because he actually felt, I guess, all the knowledge like really messed him up, and I don't think he wanted to burden Jamie with it, but also I think he thought the fact that Jamie creates duplicates to send them out into the world to live all this stuff, and then sometimes it's terrible, is pretty awful in and of itself, which kinda true. Batman is hands down one of the best detectives we have in comic book history. Like overall, like we're not just talking DC, we're not just talking Marvel, I'm talking all of comics. He is known as the world's greatest detective at DC Comics. That being said, he's had some stiff competition over the years, but when it comes to the most iconic and often most capable detective we have in the comics, Batman still, I would say, has to take the top spot. I mean, Batman made his first appearance in Detective Comics. Detective Comics. When we think of comics and detectives, he is the person we think of first. And it isn't even like this is just a title for him. Batman has also earned his rep as one of the greatest detectives of all time. He's trained with some of the best in the world, and he has proven time and time again to be unstoppable thanks to his observation skills, allowing him to be multiple steps ahead of his enemies, even when they think, wrongfully, that they've pulled the wool over his eyes. Spoiler alert, if you think you've done that, you probably haven't. That's about it. I'm your host, Amanda McKnight, aka VampX13. Until next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube. Bye.